She'd been invisible for 8 months in the Mufang Palace, just another Omega who scrubbed floors warriors never bothered to learn. But when two rogues left her bleeding in the rain because of the palace crest on her collar, she thought she'd die forgotten. She was wrong. By dawn, the Alpha King had scented her blood on the wind, and every rogue within 100 miles learned what it meant to hurt something that belonged to Renarian. Welcome back to my channel, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. I'd been invisible for 8 months. That's the truth of working in a palace like Mufang. You learn to move through corridors like air, present but unnoticed. My hands scrubbed stone floors that gleamed under torchlight I could never afford to keep burning in my own home. I folded linen softer than anything I'd ever slept on. I polished armor that belonged to warriors whose names I knew only because I heard them shouted across training yards. The palace sprawled across the heart of the Mufang territory, all dark stone and ancient wood and windows that overlooked forests I could barely afford the time to walk through. Alpha King Renarian himself was a shadow I'd learned to predict. I heard his footsteps in the halls, measured, deliberate, heavy with the weight of command, and knew to be elsewhere. I caught glimpses of him through doorways, dark hair that fell just past his collar, leather and fur draped across shoulders that looked carved from mountain stone, and eyes the color of amber that never quite landed on me. He held councils in the great hall with warriors who spoke in growls and left through side corridors. I cleaned up after them, swept ash from the hearth, collected forgotten tankards still wet with mead. I didn't ask questions. That wasn't my job. My job was to disappear. The only constant in this carefully ordered existence was the rain. 3 days of it, turning the entire territory into a study of mud and misery. Which, of course, meant the laundry had doubled. Tripled, really. Every warrior's cloak came back looking like it had been dragged through a swamp, and all of it eventually landed in my washing basin. I used to joke, quietly, to myself, that the moon goddess must have a personal grudge against Omegas. But the joke never made it past my lips. Omegas weren't encouraged to be funny. Thursday evening, the great bell chimed 10 times as I finished wringing out the last of the tunics. My shoulders ached from scrubbing, and my lower back protested when I bent to collect my basket. October in the Mufang territory meant darkness fell early, and through the narrow windows, I watched rain continue to streak the glass. You heading out? Mira appeared from the kitchens, pulling her shawl tight against the chill. She smelled like rosemary and roasted meat from whatever she'd prepared for the Alpha's dinner. Yeah, long day. She studied my face with the particular intensity only friends who'd survived the same hardships could manage. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You always say that. She linked her arm through mine as we walked toward the servants' entrance. Rest tomorrow? We could take the afternoon and go to the market. If I'm not working. Linnea. Her voice carried gentle reproach. You can't keep doing doubles forever. But I could. I had to. The coin I earned went to keeping a roof over my head in a cottage barely big enough to turn around in. Keeping food in my stomach. Keeping myself alive in a world that didn't particularly care if I was. Outside, the rain had graduated from drizzle to downpour. We huddled under the small awning by the servant's door, and Mira pulled her hood up. Ready to make a run for it? She asked. 3 miles. That's all it was. 3 miles from Mufang Palace through the forest to the cluster of cottages where servants and laborers lived. I'd walked it hundreds of times, usually with Mira, sometimes alone when our shifts didn't align. The forest was supposed to be safe. This was the Alpha King's territory, after all, and I'd heard the whispers about what that meant. Protection. Order. Rules enforced by warriors who patrolled the borders with teeth and claws. Tonight, Mira got a message before we left. Some emergency with her sister that had her swearing under her breath and apologizing profusely. Go, I told her. I'll be fine. You sure? It's 3 miles. I could walk it blind. She kissed my cheek and ran toward the stables where she kept her horse. I watched her disappear into sheets of rain, then pulled my hood up and started walking. The forest was quieter than usual. Most creatures had taken shelter from the storm, leaving only the sound of rain drumming against leaves and the squelch of mud beneath my boots. I kept my head down, focused on the familiar path, counting landmarks like prayer beads. The lightning-split oak. The boulder shaped like a sleeping bear. The clearing where wildflowers bloomed in spring. 2 miles down. 1 to go. That's when I heard it. A twig snapping behind me, too sharp to be rain, too deliberate to be wind. I stopped, heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. My hand instinctively tightened on the small satchel I carried, my only possessions worth mentioning. A crust of bread. Some dried herbs. A wooden comb my mother had carved before she died. Another snap. Then a low, rumbling growl that raised every hair on the back of my neck. 2 shapes slipped from the shadows between the trees, moving with the fluid grace of predators. Wolves. No rogues. Their eyes were wild, their fur matted and scarred, their scent sharp with something that made my omega instincts scream danger. One of them shifted, bones cracking and reforming until a man stood where the wolf had been. He was maybe 30, with a shaved head and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in months. Well, he said, lips pulling back to show teeth that were still too sharp. A palace girl. I took a step back. I don't have money. My voice came out steadier than I felt, which was something. 8 months of invisible servitude had at least taught me how to lie. The second wolf circled around behind me, cutting off escape. I heard him shift too, felt his presence at my back like a blade pressed to my spine. Forget money, the first one said, moving closer. Look at her uniform. His eyes fixed on my collar, where the palace crest was embroidered in silver thread. A wolf's head with crescent-shaped eyes. The mark of Moonfong. Palace servant, the one behind me said. His voice was rougher, like gravel scraped across stone. Bet the Alpha would send warriors if she screamed. Then we'll make sure she can't. I didn't have time to run. Didn't have time to scream. The first one grabbed my arm with a grip that felt like iron, yanking me forward. I stumbled, fell to my knees in the mud, and that's when the real pain started. Claws raked across my shoulder. A fist caught my cheekbone with enough force to snap my head to the side. I tasted blood, felt rain mixing with it as it ran down my face. I fought back once, landed what was generously a slap, more like an offended pat against the first rogue's chest. But I was Omega, and they were wolves drunk on violence and whatever grudge they carried against the Alpha King. This is a message, the first one snarled in my ear as his claws dug into my ribs. Tell your precious Alpha that his reach isn't as long as he thinks. Another blow. Then another. Pain bloomed in bursts of white and purple behind my eyes. Rain washed my blood into the earth beneath me. I curled inward, protecting my head and vital organs, and endured. I survived through sheer stubbornness and a lifelong habit of suffering quietly. When they finally left, vanishing back into the forest like the nightmares they were, I stayed on the ground for a long time. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. Time felt strange, elastic, like it had stopped meaning anything. Eventually, I dragged myself to a fallen log and sat there until the world stopped spinning quite so violently. Of course, I muttered through split lips, my voice barely audible over the rain. This is what I get for staying late to wash 37 cloaks. 37. Even nearly dying couldn't kill my sarcasm. It was pitch black by the time I made it to my cottage. Every step was agony. My left side screamed where claws had torn through flesh. My face throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I could barely see through my right eye, swollen nearly shut. I cleaned my wounds as best I could, which wasn't very well, because my hands shook and my vision kept blurring. I pressed a rag to the worst of the cuts, changed into a dry shift, and collapsed onto my bed. Sleep came in fragments, broken by pain that pulsed through my body with every breath. I didn't know my blood had already been scented on the wind. By the wrong wolves. And by the right one. Dawn broke with thunder that shook the palace foundations. Alpha King Renarian was on patrol with his warriors when it hit him, a scent so sharp and metallic it cut through the fresh morning air like a blade. Blood. Not the blood of prey or the aftermath of a hunt. This was different. This was her blood. He didn't know her name. Didn't know her voice beyond the occasional, yes, Alpha, he'd heard in passing. but he knew her scent. He'd noticed it months ago, drifting from the laundry rooms and lower courtyards. Soft, clean, quiet. A scent that didn't demand attention but somehow kept stealing his anyway. He'd tried to ignore it. He was an alpha king with a territory to protect, alliances to maintain, enemies to crush. He didn't have time to be distracted by an omega who folded his linens and scrubbed his floors. Until now. The scent trail led through the forest, following the servant's path. Renarian moved with predatory focus, his wolf clawing at his consciousness, demanding he shift and hunt. His warriors flanked him, Kale on his right, silver-haired and scarred, and Thorn on his left, younger, but no less deadly. Alpha, Kale said carefully. That's palace scent. One of the servants. I know. We should send scouts ahead. Could be a trap. Renarian's eyes flashed gold. It's not a trap. How did he know? He couldn't explain it. Some primal part of him recognized her blood the way wolves recognized their own pack. She belonged to Mufang. To him. And someone had dared hurt her. The trail grew stronger as they moved deeper into the forest. Blood patterns smeared across leaves. Claw marks gouged into tree bark. Signs of a struggle, of violence, of prey that had fought back even knowing it would lose. When Renarian found the spot where she'd been attacked, rage exploded through him like wildfire. Her blood soaked the ground. Mud churned by multiple sets of footprints, 2 rogues at least, maybe more. The metallic sweetness of her fear still clung to the air, hours old but unmistakable. His vision went crimson at the edges. Rogue scent, Thorn confirmed, crouching to examine the tracks. 2 males. They headed east after. Find them. Renarian's voice came out as a growl, inhuman and terrifying. Find them and bring them to me alive. I want to look them in the eyes before I tear their throats out. Kale and Thorn exchanged glances. When the Alpha King spoke like that, it meant 2 things. Someone was about to die, and it wouldn't be quick. What about the girl? Kale asked. Renarian was already moving, following her scent toward the cluster of cottages beyond the tree line. She's mine to deal with. I woke to pounding on my door. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, a nightmare about fists and claws and rain that wouldn't stop falling. But the pounding continued, insistent and real, dragging me fully into consciousness. Every part of my body hurt. My ribs screamed when I tried to sit up. My face felt like it had been used as a training dummy. When I finally managed to stand, the world tilted dangerously, and I had to grip the bedpost to stay upright. The pounding came again, harder this time. Coming, I croaked, my voice barely recognizable. I stumbled to the door, not bothering to check my reflection. What did it matter what I looked like? Probably Mira, come to check on me after the storm. I opened the door. Alpha King Renarian stood on my threshold, rain still dripping from his dark cloak, his amber eyes blazing with an intensity that made my breath catch despite the pain. I'd never been this close to him before. Never seen the sharp angles of his face this clearly, or the way his jaw clenched like he was physically restraining violence. He was taller than I'd realized, broader, radiating a power that made the air around him feel heavier. Behind him, I could see warriors, at least 4 of them, standing in the rain like sentinels. Who? I whispered, confusion clouding my thoughts. Who are you? The question was stupid. I knew who he was. But my brain wasn't working properly, and nothing about this made sense. Why would the Alpha King be at my door? Why would he be looking at me like that, like I was something precious that had been broken? Renarian didn't answer at first. His eyes tracked over my face, cataloging every injury with terrifying precision. The swollen eye, the split lip, the bruises blooming across my jaw in shades of purple and black. His hands curled into fists at his sides. A low growl rumbled in his chest, so deep I felt it in my bones. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely controlled fury wrapped in silk. Who did this to you? I blinked. Tried to process the question. Tried to understand why it mattered, why he was here, why he looked like he wanted to burn the entire forest down. It was just rogues. On the path. They. Names. He stepped closer, and I instinctively backed up. He followed, crossing my threshold without invitation, his presence filling my tiny cottage like a storm. I need names, Linnea. He knew my name. That realization hit me harder than any blow from the night before. 8 months of invisibility, and he'd known my name all along. I don't know their names, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. They were rogues. They saw my uniform, the palace crest, and my voice broke. I couldn't finish. Couldn't put into words the helplessness I'd felt, pinned in the mud while they delivered their message through violence. Renarian's expression shifted. The rage was still there, burning just beneath the surface, but something else emerged too. Something almost tender in the way he reached out, his fingers hovering near my face, but not quite touching. "Let me see," he said softly. I should have refused. Should have told him I was fine and didn't need an Alpha King's attention. But there was something in his voice, a command, yes, but also a plea, that made me tilt my face toward the light. His sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know about how bad I looked. "They did this because you work for me." It wasn't a question. His thumb traced the air beside my cheekbone, careful not to touch the bruise. "They attacked you to send me a message. They said—" I swallowed against the pain in my throat. "They said your reach isn't as long as you think." The growl that rumbled through him was purely wolf. His eyes flashed gold, actually glowed with inner fire, and for a heartbeat, I thought he might shift right there in my cottage. Instead, he turned toward the door where his warriors waited. "Kale. Thorn. I want every rogue within 100 miles found and questioned. Start with the eastern packs. That's where this scent trail led. Anyone who was near the forest path last night, I want them brought to the palace." "All of them?" Kale asked carefully. "Every single one." Renarian's voice was death itself. "If they had nothing to do with this, they'll be released unharmed. If they did—" He paused, his jaw working. "They'll wish they'd never been born." The warriors left without another word, melting into the pre-dawn darkness. Renarian turned back to me, and his expression softened fractionally. "You're coming with me." "What?" "No, I can't. I have work." "You're injured." Not a suggestion. A statement of fact that apparently superseded all other concerns. "You need a healer, proper medicine, and rest. You'll get none of those things here." He gestured around my cottage, one room with a bed, a table, a hearth that barely kept out the cold. It wasn't much, but it was mine. "I can take care of myself," I said, even as my body screamed that this was a lie. "I don't need." "This isn't a request, Linnea." His eyes met mine, amber burning into gray. "Someone hurt you because of me. Because you wear my crest. That makes you my responsibility." "That's not how responsibility works." "It is in my world." We stared at each other for a long moment. I wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain some shred of dignity and independence. But exhaustion and pain were catching up to me, dragging at my bones until standing felt impossible. "Fine," I whispered. "One day. Just until I can walk without." The world tilted suddenly. My legs gave out, and I would have hit the floor if Renarian hadn't moved within human speed, catching me against his chest. His arms came around me careful, so careful, and for the first time since the attack, I felt safe. His scent wrapped around me. Cedar and smoke, and something wild that called to instincts I didn't fully understand. His heart beat steady against my ear, strong and sure, an anchor in the chaos my life had become. "I've got you," he murmured, and there was something in his voice that made it sound like a vow. "You're safe now." I wanted to tell him I'd been safe before, that I'd survived just fine on my own. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I let myself go limp in his arms, let him lift me like I weighed nothing, and carried me out into the rain. The last thing I remember before unconsciousness claimed me was the steady rhythm of his stride, the warmth of his body cutting through the cold, and the way his grip tightened when I made a soft sound of pain. Like I was something worth protecting. Like I mattered. I woke in a bed softer than anything I'd ever touched in my life. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. The mattress cradled me like a cloud, the sheets smelled of lavender and something cleaner than rain, and warmth surrounded me, actual warmth, not the barely there heat my cottage hearth provided on good days. Then I tried to move, and pain flared along my left side, sharp enough to make me gasp. Not a dream. Very much reality. I opened my eyes, or tried to. My right eye was still swollen, offering only a narrow slit of vision. The left worked better, showing me a room I'd never seen before but had definitely cleaned. The Alpha King's guest chambers. Cream-colored walls. Tapestries depicting wolf hunts under full moons. Furniture carved from dark wood that looked ancient and impossibly expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the palace gardens, now visible in early morning light. I was in the palace. In a guest room. In a bed meant for visiting nobles, not Omega servants who scrubbed floors. Panic clawed up my throat. This was wrong. I didn't belong here. Someone would realize the mistake, and I'd be thrown out, or worse, punished for daring to occupy space meant for my betters. You're awake. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Renarian sat in a chair by the window, positioned so he could watch both the door and the bed. How long had he been there? Had he been watching me sleep? The thought should have felt intrusive. Instead, something warm unfurled in my chest. How do you feel? He asked, rising and crossing to the bed with that predatory grace I'd only ever glimpsed from a distance. My voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. I shouldn't be here. This room is for guests, not. You are a guest. He pulled the chair closer to the bedside and sat, bringing himself to eye level with me. You're also injured because of me. Which means you stay here until I'm satisfied you've healed properly. Alpha King, I appreciate. Renarian. The word came out softer than I expected, almost gentle. When we're alone, you can call me Renarian. I stared at him, trying to process this. Alpha Kings didn't ask Omega servants to use their given names. They barely acknowledged Omega servants existed beyond the work they performed. I don't understand, I admitted. Why are you doing this? His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't answer, just studied my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. His eyes were amber in the morning light, flecked with gold that seemed to glow from within. Because you shouldn't have been walking that path alone, he said finally. Because my warriors should have been patrolling more thoroughly. Because someone saw my crest on your uniform and decided that made you a target. He leaned forward slightly. And because He stopped. Looked away. His hands curled into fists on his thighs. Because you what? I prompted, unable to stop myself. Because I should have noticed you before this. The admission seemed to cost him something. You've worked in my palace for 8 months. I've walked past you dozens of times, and he exhaled roughly. I never saw you until it was almost too late. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't sure I understood. What did he mean, almost too late? Too late for what? Before I could ask, a knock came at the door. Renarian's expression shifted instantly from vulnerable to commanding. Enter. An elderly woman bustled in, carrying a tray laden with bottles and bandages. I recognized her, Petra, the palace healer. I'd washed her work tunics enough times to know the herb stains never quite came out. Good, you're awake. She set the tray on the bedside table and gave me a professional once-over. Let's see what we're working with. Renarian stood, giving her space to work, but he didn't leave. Just moved to stand by the window, arms crossed, watching. Petra examined me with gentle efficiency, checking the cuts on my shoulder, the bruising along my ribs, the swelling around my eye. Her touch was practiced but kind, and she made soft sking sounds as she catalogued each injury. Claw marks here, she murmured, mostly to herself. Blunt force trauma to the face. Bruised ribs, at least 2, possibly 3. She glanced at Renarian. She's lucky they didn't break anything vital. Another few strikes, and we'd be having a very different conversation. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. I saw Renarian's hands curl into fists, saw his jaw clench so hard I thought his teeth might crack. How long until she's healed? His voice was carefully controlled, each word measured. The bruising will fade in a week or 2. The cuts should close in 4 or 5 days, provided they don't get infected. Petra began cleaning the wounds with something that stung but smelled of mint. The ribs will take longer, 3 weeks, maybe 4. She needs rest, proper food, and absolutely no heavy lifting. She'll have all of that. And no going back to work until I clear her, Petra added firmly, looking at me. I know your type, girl. You'll try to push through because you think you have to. Don't. Your body needs time to heal. I opened my mouth to protest, but Renarian cut me off. She won't be working. Not a suggestion. Consider it paid leave. Full wages, no duties. I can't accept. You can and will. His tone left no room for argument. Those are my terms. You heal first. Everything else comes after. Petra finished bandaging the worst of the cuts, then mixed something in a small cup, herbs and powder and liquid that turned an alarming shade of purple. Drink this, she said, holding it out to me. It'll help with the pain and help you sleep. You need rest more than anything right now. The mixture tasted like dirt and bitter flowers, but I choked it down. Within minutes, I felt the edges of my consciousness starting to blur, warmth spreading through my limbs like honey. Good girl, Petra murmured, patting my hand. Sleep now. When you wake, I'll bring food. She left, and I fought against the pull of the medicine, wanting to stay awake, to understand what was happening. But my eyelids were so heavy, and the bed was so soft, and Renarian's presence by the window felt like a guard standing watch. Rest, he said quietly, and his voice was the last thing I heard before sleep claimed me. I surfaced sometime later, hours? Days, to the sound of angry voices beyond the door. Absolutely found them, and you're going to want to see this. That was Kale, the silver-haired warrior. His voice carried the particular tone of someone delivering news that would end badly for everyone involved. Bring them to the lower cells. Renarian's voice, cold as winter. I'll be down shortly. They're already asking for mercy. They'll get none. Footsteps retreated. I heard Renarian move toward the door, then stop. A long pause. Then his footsteps approached the bed instead. I kept my eyes closed, feigning sleep, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I wanted to hear what he'd say when he thought I couldn't hear. Maybe because some part of me was afraid of what I'd see in his face. His hand touched my forehead, gentle, testing for fever. His fingers brushed hair back from my face with a tenderness that made my throat tight. I'm sorry, he whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. That I didn't see you before this. But I see you now, Linnea. And I swear on my father's grave, no one will ever hurt you again. His lips brushed my forehead, the barest touch, there and gone, and then he was moving away, his footsteps receding toward the door. It closed with a soft click. I opened my eyes, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. The Alpha King had just promised to protect me. The Alpha King had just kissed my forehead. The Alpha King had been watching me sleep. None of this made sense. I was nobody. Nothing. An Omega who washed clothes and scrubbed floors. Why would he care? Why would he? The door opened again. I quickly closed my eyes, expecting Renarian to return. Instead, I heard lighter footsteps. Female. I know you're awake, Myra's voice said, amused. You're breathing wrong. I cracked one eye open. She stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, looking both worried and exasperated. Mira. Relief flooded through me. How did you? The entire palace is talking about how the Alpha King personally carried you in at dawn, covered in blood, and installed you in the guest chambers. She moved to sit on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle me. Care to explain why you didn't wait for me last night? Guilt twisted in my stomach. You had an emergency with your sister. My sister's emergency was that she couldn't find her favorite hair ribbon, which I discovered after I left you alone. Her expression softened. Linnea, I'm so sorry. If I'd known. It's not your fault. I reached for her hand, squeezed it weakly. It's not anyone's fault except the rogues who decided I was a convenient target. The Alpha King doesn't see it that way. She glanced toward the door, lowering her voice. He's had warriors combing the entire territory since dawn. Every rogue pack, every border settlement. Kale told one of the kitchen girls they found the ones who did it. My stomach dropped. What's he going to do to them? Myra's expression turned grim. What do you think? I knew. Of course I knew. This was the Alpha King, the man whispered about in taverns with equal parts fear and awe. The man who ruled through strength and decisive violence. The man who didn't tolerate challenges to his authority. He's going to kill them, I said quietly. Yes. Mira squeezed my hand. And honestly, after what they did to you, I can't say I blame him. I wanted to feel something about that, horror, maybe, or moral conflict. But all I felt was a strange sort of numbness. Those rogues had hurt me deliberately, violently, because I worked for Renarian. They'd known what they were doing when they left me bleeding in the rain. Does that make me a terrible person? I asked. That I don't feel bad about it? No. Myra's voice was firm. It makes you someone who understands justice. They hurt you. They face consequences. That's how the world works. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she tilted her head, studying me with those two knowing eyes. He likes you, she said. What? No, he's just... Linnea. I've worked here for 3 years. I've seen the Alpha King with visiting nobles, with warriors, with everyone from merchants to rival pack leaders. She leaned closer. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you when he carried you in. Like you were the most precious thing in the world, and he'd just discovered someone had tried to break you. Heat flooded my face despite the bruising. You're imagining things. Am I? Because apparently he's been sitting in that chair watching you sleep for the last 6 hours. Refused to leave even when Kale came to report. Told Petra to clear her schedule because you're her only patient until you're fully healed. She raised an eyebrow. That sound like normal Alpha King behavior to you? It didn't. It really, really didn't. But I couldn't let myself believe what she was implying. That would be dangerous. Foolish. Setting myself up for a heartbreak I couldn't afford. He feels responsible, I said. That's all. I got hurt in his territory while wearing his crest. His honor demands he make it right. Keep telling yourself that. Mira stood, smoothing her skirts. But Linnea? When a man like Renarian decides something is his to protect, he doesn't let go. Ever. She left before I could respond, and I was alone again with my thoughts and the lingering warmth of Renarian's touch on my forehead. Through the windows, I watched clouds gather over the forest. Somewhere in the palace depths, the Alpha King was dealing out justice to the rogues who'd hurt me. And I was lying in a bed meant for nobility, wrapped in sheets that smelled like lavender, trying to understand how my world had tilted so completely off its axis in the span of a single night. I didn't see Renarian for the rest of that day. Petra came and went, bringing food I could barely taste and medicines that made me sleep in fits and starts. Mira visited twice more, updating me on palace gossip. Apparently, the entire household was buzzing with speculation about why the Alpha King had personally carried an Omega servant into the guest chambers and stationed guards at her door. Guards. At my door. Like I was someone worth protecting instead of someone who cleaned up after people worth protecting. Every time I started to drift off, I heard sounds from deeper in the palace. Raised voices. The distant clang of metal. Once, a howl that made my wolf stir uneasily beneath my skin, a sound of dominance and fury that could only come from an alpha in full rage. I tried not to think about what was happening in those lower cells. Tried not to picture Renarian delivering justice with claws and teeth. Tried not to feel the complicated knot of emotions that came with knowing someone was being hurt, killed, probably because they'd hurt me. Night fell. The palace grew quiet. I was staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite the medicine, when I heard the door open. Renarian entered silently, closing it behind him with careful precision. Even in the dim light from the dying hearth, I could see he'd changed clothes, the leather and fur from earlier replaced by simple dark trousers and a loose linen shirt. His hair was damp, like he'd recently bathed. Washing off blood, some part of my mind supplied unhelpfully. You're awake, he said quietly, moving to add wood to the fire. Flames caught and grew, casting warm light across his features. Couldn't sleep. My voice came out rough from disuse. The medicine makes me feel strange. Like I'm floating. That's normal. Petra uses valerian root and moonflower, strong herbs. He pulled the chair closer to the bed but didn't sit. Just stood there, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. How's the pain? Better. The cuts don't hurt as much. I hesitated. Did you? Were you able to find them? The rogues. His expression went cold. Yes. And? They confessed. Told me everything. He finally sat, his movements controlled but tense, like he was restraining violence even now. They were hired by a rival pack leader to cause problems in my territory. Make me look weak. Prove I couldn't protect my own people. So it wasn't random. No, it was deliberate. Calculated. His jaw clenched. They were supposed to target anyone wearing palace colors. You were just convenient. The word hit me harder than it should have. Convenient. That's all I'd been to them. A convenient target in a political game I didn't understand and hadn't asked to be part of. What did you do to them? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Renarian met my eyes directly. I killed them. Quickly, which was more mercy than they deserved. He paused. Does that frighten you? It should have. I should have been horrified that the man sitting beside my bed had just ended 2 lives. But instead, all I felt was that strange sense of safety that came from knowing someone powerful was on my side. No, I admitted quietly. Should it? Most people would say yes. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, amber eyes reflecting firelight. I'm not a good man, Linnea. I do terrible things to maintain order and protect what's mine. I've killed more people than I can count. Made decisions that haunt me in the dark hours of the night. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want you to have illusions about what I am. His voice dropped lower. And because I need you to understand something. What? You're under my protection now. Officially. Anyone who hurts you will answer to me personally. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed his fingers along my uninjured cheek. That makes you valuable. It also makes you a target. His touch was warm, calloused from weapons training and violence, but gentle in a way that made my breath catch. I should have pulled away. Should have reminded him I was just a servant, nobody important, not worth this kind of attention. Instead, I leaned into his palm like a flower turning toward the sun. I don't understand, I whispered. Why do you care? I'm nobody. Just an Omega who washes clothes. You're not nobody. His thumb traced the curve of my jaw, careful to avoid the bruising. You haven't been nobody since the first time I caught your scent in the laundry room 6 months ago. My heart stuttered. 6 months. I told myself I was imagining it. That it was just a pleasant scent. Nothing more. A muscle ticked in his jaw. But then I found myself walking past the laundry room more often. Timing my schedule so I'd be in the corridors when you were working. Noticing things about you. What things? The question came out barely audible. The way you organize books by author without being asked. How you hum sometimes when you think no one's listening, always the same melody, something your mother taught you, probably. His eyes held mine. How you take every extra shift offered because you need the coin. How you never complain, never ask for anything, just do your work with quiet confidence. He noticed all of that? I'd thought I was invisible. Thought I moved through the palace like air, present but unobserved. But he'd been watching. Noticing. Seeing me in ways I'd never realized. I still don't understand why, I said. You're the Alpha King. You could have anyone. Noble daughters, visiting dignitaries, anyone you wanted. Why would you notice me? Renarian was quiet for a long moment, his hand still cupping my face, his thumb making slow circles against my skin that sent shivers down my spine. Do you know what a true mate bond is? He asked finally. My breath caught. Every wolf knew about true mates, the moon goddess's gift, rare and precious. A bond that connected 2 souls so deeply that they became essential to each other's existence. Most wolves never found their true mate. Most settled for chosen mates, political alliances, relationships built on compatibility rather than cosmic destiny. Yes, I whispered. But that's just stories. Legend. It barely ever happens. It happens. His eyes glowed faint gold in the firelight. And when it does, you know. The moment you sent them, something inside you recognizes what they are. What they're meant to be. Understanding crashed over me like a wave. You think I think the moon goddess has a cruel sense of humor. His smile was bitter. Making my true mate an Omega servant I'd been too blind and too proud to acknowledge. Making me wait 6 months, content to just watch you from a distance like some lovesick fool, until it took you nearly dying for me to act. True mate. He thought I was his true mate. The revelation should have felt like a gift. Like the answer to every prayer I'd never dared speak. But instead, panic clawed up my throat. No, I breathed. No, that's not. I can't be. You're wrong. His expression shuddered. You don't feel it? The pull. Did I? I thought about the way my wolf had stirred whenever he passed in the corridors, even when I couldn't see him. The way his scent made me feel safe in a way nothing else ever had. The way his touch now felt like coming home to a place I'd never known existed. I feel something, I admitted. But Renarian, I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer you. No power, no connections, no. I don't care about any of that. He moved closer, his other hand coming up to frame my face. I have power. I have connections. What I don't have is someone who looks at me like I'm just a man instead of a weapon to be feared or a throne to be won. I do fear you, I whispered honestly. You're terrifying. But you're not afraid of me. There's a difference. His forehead came to rest against mine, gentle, so gentle, like I was something breakable. I'm not asking you to accept this bond right now. I know it's too much, too fast. You're hurt and vulnerable and probably think I'm taking advantage. Are you? No. Absolute certainty. But I understand if you can't believe that yet. So I'm asking for time. Let me protect you. Let me prove I see you, really see you, not just as a mate bond, but as you. And when you're healed, when your head is clear and you've had time to think, then decide. Decide what? Whether you want this. Want me. His breath ghosted across my lips, warm and steady. Because a mate bond goes both ways, Linnea. If you reject it, if you don't want me, I'll respect that. I'll make sure you're safe and cared for, and I'll let you go. The offer was impossibly generous. Dangerously so. Alpha Kings didn't let go of their true mates. The bond was too strong, too consuming. He was essentially promising to endure half a life of emptiness if I chose to walk away. Why would you do that? I asked. Risk losing your true mate? Because you deserve the choice I never had. His eyes searched mine. The moon goddess chose for us. But you should get to choose for yourself. Something cracked open in my chest, something I'd kept carefully guarded for 8 months of invisible servitude. The part of me that had stopped believing I deserved to be chosen. That had accepted my lot as someone unworthy of notice or care. He was offering me something I'd never had. Agency. Choice. The power to decide my own fate. I need time, I whispered. To heal. To think. To understand what this means. You'll have it. He pulled back slightly, his hands dropping away, leaving cold spots where his touch had been. But while you're thinking, I need you to stay in the palace. Let me keep you safe. I can't just abandon my work. My cottage. Your cottage will be maintained. Your position held. And you'll receive full wages as if you were working. He stood, putting professional distance between us. Consider it medical leave. Petra's orders. That's not fair to the other servants. I'm the Alpha King. I don't have to be fair. But his expression softened. Though if it makes you feel better, I'm expanding the household budget to hire additional help. No one will have to work extra shifts to cover your absence. He'd thought of everything. Anticipated every objection. Made it as easy as possible for me to say yes. 1 week, I said finally. I'll stay 1 week. Let Petra confirm I'm healing properly. And then we'll talk about what comes next. Relief flickered across his face, there and gone so quickly I almost missed it. 1 week. Agreed. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Linnea? Yes. I meant what I said earlier. You were never nobody to me. From the first moment I scented you, you've been everything. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the crackling fire and the thundering of my heart and the impossible knowledge that the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the territory, thought I was his true mate. The week that followed was the strangest of my life. I woke each morning in the guest chambers, which I'd started thinking of as my room, despite knowing I had no claim to it. Petra arrived early to check my wounds, which were healing faster than expected. The bruising faded from purple to yellow. The cuts closed cleanly. Even my ribs stopped aching when I breathed deeply. You're healing like a wolf half your age, Petra observed on the 3rd day, pressing carefully along my side. Almost like something's accelerating the process. Is that unusual? For an Omega? Very. She gave me a knowing look. Unless there's a mate bond involved. Those can speed healing significantly, especially if the bond is acknowledged even partially. I thought about Renarian's hands on my face. His forehead against mine. The way my wolf had settled beneath my skin like she'd finally found home. I haven't accepted any bond, I said carefully. Doesn't matter. The bond exists whether you accept it or not. Your body knows it, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. She packed away her supplies. Just don't fight it too hard, girl. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. But didn't she? How could I, an Omega servant with nothing to my name, be meant for the Alpha King? It seemed less like divine wisdom and more like cosmic cruelty. Renarian visited every day. Sometimes multiple times, always with some excuse. Bringing food Petra had ordered. Checking that the fire was tended. Asking if I needed anything. He never stayed long. Never pushed. Just made his presence known and then left me alone to think. Except once. It was the fourth night and I'd been restless. The medicine made me drowsy, but not enough to actually sleep. I was standing by the window, watching the moon rise over the forest when I heard the door open. Can't sleep. Renarian's voice, soft in the darkness. The room is too quiet. At home, I can hear the forest. All's hunting. Wind in the trees. Here, everything is. I gestured vaguely. Muffled. He moved to stand beside me, maintaining careful distance. Close enough that I could feel his warmth, far enough that we weren't touching. I could have someone move you to a room facing the forest, he offered. No. I like this view. I did. The gardens were beautiful in moonlight, all silver and shadow. I've cleaned these windows dozens of times, but never looked out them like this. Like I had a right to. You have a right to anything in this palace, Linnea. You're under my protection. That gives you status whether you want it or not. We stood in silence for a while, watching the moon climb higher. Then, impulsively, I asked the question that had been plaguing me. Do you resent it? That your true mate is me? He turned to look at me, expression unreadable. Why would I resent it? Because I'm nobody. Because I can't help you politically. Because having an Omega servant as a mate probably makes you look weak to other pack leaders. Let me tell you something about pack leaders. His voice went hard. They respect strength. And claiming my true mate, protecting what the moon goddess herself chose for me, that's strength. Any alpha who thinks otherwise is a fool I'll crush without hesitation. The casual certainty in his words sent a shiver through me. Not fear. Something else. Something dangerous. Besides, he continued, voice softening, you're not nobody. You're mine. That makes you the most important person in this territory. I'm not yours. Not yet. Maybe not ever, though I didn't say that part out loud. No. He turned back to the window. But you could be. If you wanted. And if I don't? I had to ask. Had to know. If I think this bond is a mistake, then I'll live with that. The words sounded like they cost him. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Protected. And I'll hope that maybe, someday, you'll change your mind. He would do that. I could see it in every line of his body, hear it in every word. He would let me go, let me reject the bond, and spend the rest of his life half-whole because his mate had chosen differently. The thought made my chest ache. I should let you rest, he said, moving toward the door. Wait. He stopped. Turned. Looked at me with those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever built. Would you? I swallowed hard, making myself vulnerable in a way I'd never dared before. Would you stay? Just until I fall asleep. His expression transformed. Hope and wonder and something that looked almost like joy flickered across his features before he controlled them. I'd be honored. He settled into the chair by the fireplace while I climbed back into bed. And there, with the Alpha King keeping watch like a guardian against the dark, I finally slept soundly for the first time since the attack. The fifth morning, I woke to chaos. Shouting echoed through the palace corridors, not the controlled barking of orders, but genuine alarm. Running footsteps. The clash of weapons being drawn. And underneath it all, a howl that raised every hair on my body. I was out of bed before I'd fully processed what I was doing, ignoring the protest from my still healing ribs. The door burst open before I reached it. Kale stood there, silver hair wild, a cut bleeding freely down his cheek. You need to come with me. Now. What's happening? Rival pack. They breached the eastern border. He grabbed my arm, not roughly, but urgently. The Alpha King's orders. You're to be moved to the safe room until... A crash from somewhere below cut him off. Glass shattering. A roar of fury that I recognized instantly as Renarian's. How many? I asked, even as Kale pulled me into the corridor. 15, maybe 20. Well armed. His jaw clenched. They're asking for you by name, Linnea. This is about you. Ice flooded my veins. What? The pack leader whose rogues attacked you, apparently killing 2 of his wolves wasn't enough. He wants compensation. Kale's expression was grim as we moved quickly through passages I'd cleaned but never walked with such purpose. He's demanding the Alpha King hand you over as retribution. That's insane. I didn't do anything. You exist. You matter to Renarian. That makes you valuable leverage. We rounded a corner, heading toward the inner keep where the palace's most secure chambers were located. And it makes you a target every rival will try to exploit. This was what Renarian had warned me about. Being under his protection meant being valuable. It also meant being a weakness his enemies would strike at. We reached a reinforced door carved with protective runes. Kale pulled it open, revealing a small chamber with stone walls and no windows. A cage, essentially, but one meant to keep threats out rather than keep me in. I can't hide, I said, planting my feet. If they're here because of me, you'll hide because the Alpha King commanded it. Kale's voice was steel. And because if they get their hands on you, they'll use you to destroy him. Is that what you want? No. Of course not. But the thought of cowering in a safe room while Renarian fought battles caused by my existence made my stomach twist. Another howl, closer this time. The sound of splintering wood. Then Renarian's voice, amplified by fury and power, echoing through the palace. You dare come into my home and demand I surrender what's mine? The words resonated in my bones. Not just protective, possessive. Claiming me in front of witnesses, in front of enemies, making it clear that I belonged to him whether or not the mate bond was acknowledged. Please, Kale said, and the desperation in his voice decided me. I've served him for 10 years. I've never seen him like this, barely controlled, ready to tear through anything that stands between him and you. If you have any mercy, get in the safe room and let him protect you without worrying you'll be taken. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a heavy thud, and I heard the bolt slide home from the outside. Then I was alone in the dark, listening to muffled sounds of battle and wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. Time moved strangely in that windowless room. I counted my breaths to stay calm. Pressed my ear to the door, trying to make sense of the sounds that filtered through stone walls. Crashes. Snarls. The distinct sound of claws on marble. Once, a scream that cut off abruptly. And through it all, I felt it, a pull toward Renarian that had nothing to do with conscious thought. My wolf paced restlessly beneath my skin, agitated by the distance, by the danger he was facing, by the fact that our mate was fighting and we weren't by his side. Our mate. When had I started thinking of him that way? I don't know how long I waited. Could have been minutes or hours. But eventually, the sounds of fighting faded. Footsteps approached the door. Heavy. Measured. Familiar. The bolt slid back. The door opened. Renarian stood there, backlit by torches in the corridor. Blood stained his clothes, not his own, I didn't think. His eyes still glowed faint gold, remnants of the rage that had fueled whatever had just happened. Cuts marked his arms, his face, but they were already healing before my eyes. We stared at each other for a heartbeat. Then I was moving, crossing the small space without conscious decision, and his arms came around me, careful of my injuries, but desperate in a way that made my breath catch. Are you hurt? His hands moved over me, checking for wounds, for any sign I'd been harmed. Did anyone reach you? Did they? I'm fine. Kale got me to safety before. I pulled back enough to see his face. What happened? They're dealt with. His voice was rough, barely human. The pack leader is dead. His beta is dead. Anyone who stood with them is either dead or fleeing. Simple. Final. Absolute. You killed them all. I killed anyone who threatened you. His hands framed my face, tilting it up so he could search my eyes. They came into my home, demanded I hand over my mate, asked me to choose between pack politics and you. His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. There was no choice. There will never be a choice. You come first. The declaration should have been romantic. Instead, it was terrifying in its intensity. Renarian, you can't start a war every time someone threatens me. That's not sustainable. That's not. Watch me. Not a boast. A promise. Every wolf in this territory now knows what it means to come after you. Word will spread to neighboring packs, and they'll understand that you are under my protection in ways that go beyond politics or alliances. Because I'm your mate. Because you're mine. He said it like a prayer and a claim simultaneously. Whether you've accepted the bond or not, whether you want this or not, you are mine to protect. Mine to avenge. Mine to keep safe even if it means painting the territory red. I should have been frightened. Should have been horrified by the violence he was offering on my behalf. But instead, I felt something warm and primal unfurl in my chest, recognition, acceptance, the beginning of surrender. My wolf knew what he was offering. Complete, absolute, terrifying devotion. The kind that came once in a lifetime, if you were lucky. The kind that would burn down the world to keep you safe. I'm sorry, I whispered. His expression shifted to confusion. For what? For causing this. For being the weakness they're using against you. He kissed me. Not gentle like I expected. Not the careful claiming I'd imagined. But desperate and consuming, his mouth moving against mine like I was air and he'd been drowning. His hands slid into my hair, angling my head, and I gasped against his lips. The mate bond flared to life between us, a golden thread I could suddenly see in my mind's eye, connecting his soul to mine with intensity that stole my breath. This was what a true mate bond felt like. This overwhelming certainty that we were meant to fit together. That everything before this moment had been preparation for finding each other. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. You are not my weakness, he growled, his forehead against mine. You are my strength. The reason I fight. The reason I'll keep fighting until every wolf in this territory and beyond understands that you are untouchable. Renarian. I know you haven't decided yet. I know you need more time. His eyes, still glowing faintly, held mine. But understand this, Linnea. Whether you accept this bond today or 10 years from now or never, I am yours. Completely. Irrevocably. That doesn't change based on your answer. The vulnerability in those words cracked something open inside me. This powerful alpha king, feared across territories, was offering me his heart without conditions. Without demands. Just offering it and trusting me to be careful with it. I need to tell you something, I said quietly. He went still. What? The night you carried me here, I wasn't completely unconscious. I heard what you said. I touched his face, traced the line of his jaw. About not seeing me before. About wishing you'd protected me sooner. Shame flickered across his features. Linnea. And I need you to know that I forgive you. Because you're seeing me now. You're protecting me now. And that matters more than all the months I spent invisible. Relief and something that looked like hope transformed his expression. You mean that? I mean it. I took a breath, steadying myself for what came next. And I need to tell you something else. What? I felt it too. The pull. Every time you walked past in the corridors, even when I couldn't see you, I knew you were there. Your scent, your presence, it was like my wolf recognized something before I was ready to acknowledge it. His hands tightened fractionally in my hair. And now? Are you ready now? Was I? This terrifying, powerful man was offering me everything, protection, devotion, a place at his side that would transform my entire existence. No more invisibility. No more being overlooked. But also no more safety in anonymity. No more simple life. The old Linnea would have been too afraid to reach for this. Would have convinced herself she didn't deserve it. Would have walked away to protect herself from inevitable heartbreak. But the old Linnea had died in that rainy forest, beaten and left bleeding. The woman who'd emerged was stronger. Braver. Willing to take risks for something that mattered. I'm ready, I whispered. I choose this. I choose you. The joy that blazed across his face was incandescent. Then he was kissing me again, but different this time, reverent, grateful, like I'd just given him something infinitely precious. The mate bond solidified between us. I felt it snap into place, this golden thread that would connect us for the rest of our lives. His emotions flooded through the link: relief, fierce protectiveness, possessive pride, and underneath it all, love so deep it made my eyes sting with tears. Mine, he murmured against my lips. Finally, completely mine. Yours, I agreed. And you're mine too. Don't forget that part. He laughed, actual laughter, rich and warm. I couldn't forget if I tried, mate. The word sent shivers through me. Mate. I was the Alpha King's mate. The moon goddess's chosen for the most powerful wolf in the territory. What happens now? I asked when we finally pulled apart, though his arms stayed locked around me like he couldn't bear to let go. Now, he considered. Now we let Petra confirm you're fully healed. Then we announce the bond officially. There will be a ceremony, nothing too elaborate if you don't want it, but enough to make it clear to every pack that you're my mate and queen. Queen. I was going to be queen. The panic must have shown on my face because Renarian's expression gentled. One step at a time. First, healing. Then ceremony. Then we figure out the rest together. I don't know how to be a queen. You'll learn. And I'll teach you. He brushed hair back from my face. Besides, you've already been leading without realizing it. You think the other servants don't watch how you work? How you treat people? You've set standards just by existing. That's leadership. I wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with me. The adrenaline from the attack had faded, leaving me shaky and overwhelmed. Come, Renarian said, sweeping me into his arms before I could protest. You need rest. Proper rest, not hiding in a safe room rest. He carried me back through corridors now marked with signs of battle, scored walls, broken furniture, blood being cleaned by servants who bowed when they saw us. Word had clearly spread. The looks they gave me were different now. Not pity or curiosity, but respect. Maybe even a touch of awe. I was the Alpha King's mate. The one he'd killed for. The one he'd chosen above politics and safety. Back in my chambers, our chambers, I suppose now, he laid me carefully on the bed. Then, to my surprise, he kicked off his boots and stretched out beside me, pulling me against his chest. Sleep, he murmured, his hand making soothing circles on my back. I'll keep watch. You need rest too. I'll rest when I'm certain you're safe. His arms tightened. Let me have this, Linnea. Let me hold you and know you're real and mine. How could I argue with that? I settled against him, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. Through the mate bond, I felt his contentment, his fierce protectiveness, his absolute certainty that this was right. And for the first time since that rainy night in the forest, I felt completely safe. Renarian. I whispered, half asleep already. Thank you. For seeing me. His lips brushed my forehead. Thank you for letting me. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the realization that I'd slept through an entire night without nightmares for the first time in days. Renarian was still beside me, awake but motionless, simply watching me with an expression so tender it made my chest ache. The blood and violence from yesterday had been washed away. He wore clean clothes, his hair still damp from bathing, and the cuts I'd seen on his face had healed completely. How long have you been awake? I asked, my voice rough with sleep. A while. His hand came up to trace the curve of my cheek, his touch gentle. I didn't want to wake you. You needed rest. Did you sleep at all? Some. Enough. His thumb brushed my lower lip. I spent most of the night just watching you. Making sure you were real. That this wasn't a dream I'd wake from. The vulnerability in those words made something warm bloom in my chest. This powerful Alpha King, feared across territories, was confessing that he'd spent the night watching me sleep like he was afraid I'd disappear. I'm real, I whispered. And I'm not going anywhere. Relief flickered across his features. Good. Because I have plans for today. What kind of plans? The kind where I introduce my mate to the pack properly. He sat up, pulling me with him, careful of my ribs even though they barely hurt anymore. Petra wants to examine you first, make sure you're fully healed. Then we addressed the pack together. Anxiety spiked through me. Address the whole pack? Renarian, I'm not ready for. You are. He cupped my face in both hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. You survived an attack that would have killed most wolves. You've been healing in the palace for a week while rumors spread. Half the territory already knows you're my mate. We need to make it official before speculation turns into something uglier. He was right. I could feel it through the bond, his certainty, his need to claim me publicly, to remove any doubt about my place at his side. What if they don't accept me? The question came out smaller than I intended. I'm nobody. An Omega servant. What if they think? They'll think what I tell them to think. Not arrogant, just factual. You're my mate. The moon goddess chose you. That makes you their queen, and they'll show you the respect that position demands. A knock interrupted us. Petra entered without waiting for permission, her healer's bag already in hand. Up, girl, she said briskly. Let's see how you've mended. The examination was thorough. Petra pressed along my ribs, checked the cuts that had already scarred over into thin silver lines, examined the bruising that had faded to barely their shadows. Remarkable, she muttered. I've never seen healing like this. The mate bond must be incredibly strong. Is that unusual? I asked. For most bonds? No. But for one this new, this recently acknowledged. She gave me a knowing look. This kind of accelerated healing usually only happens with bonds that have been fully consummated and marked. Heat flooded my face. Renarian made a sound that might have been amusement. We haven't, I started. I know, girl. I'm just saying the bond is powerful even without that. She packed away her instruments. You're cleared for normal activity. No restrictions. The body has healed. She tapped my temple. The mind might take longer. Don't push yourself too hard too fast. After she left, I stood by the window, watching the palace grounds below. Warriors trained in the courtyard. Servants moved between buildings. Normal life continuing despite the violence that had erupted yesterday. Nervous? Renarian asked, coming to stand behind me. His hands settled on my shoulders, grounding. Terrified, I admitted. A week ago, I was invisible. Now I'm supposed to stand in front of the entire pack and what? Give a speech? Pretend I know what I'm doing. You don't have to pretend anything. His hands squeezed gently. You just have to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted, just you, exactly as you are. What if that's not enough? He turned me to face him, his expression fierce. It's everything. You think I care about political connections or noble bloodlines? You think I want a mate who knows how to navigate court politics but doesn't understand real work? Real struggle. But you've survived things that would break most wolves. You've worked jobs that nobles wouldn't touch. You've endured loss and debt and invisibility, and you're still standing. Still kind. Still capable of choosing hope over bitterness. His eyes blazed. That's strength, Linnea. Real strength. And that's exactly what this pack needs in a queen. The conviction in his voice made tears prick my eyes. He really believed it. Believed I was strong enough, worthy enough exactly as I was. Okay, I whispered. Okay, I'll do it. I'll stand with you. Pride and love flooded through the bond. That's my mate. 2 hours later, I stood on the great balcony overlooking the central courtyard, Renarian beside me, and what felt like the entire pack gathered below. Hundreds of faces stared up at us. Warriors, servants, merchants, families. Wolves of every rank and position, all waiting to see what their alpha king would say. Waiting to judge whether the Omega beside him was worthy. My hands trembled. I'd changed into a dress Mira had brought, simple but elegant, deep green that brought out my eyes. Nothing too grand, nothing that would make me look like I was trying too hard. Just myself, but dressed for the occasion. Renarian's hand found mine, lacing our fingers together. The gesture was deliberate, public, unmistakable. He was claiming me in front of everyone. Wolves of Mufang, his voice carried across the courtyard, amplified by alpha command. You know me as your king. You trust me to protect this pack, to make decisions that keep us strong and safe. Today, I ask you to witness a decision the moon goddess made for me. Silence. Absolute attention focused on us. This is Linnea. He drew me forward slightly, his hand steady in mine. Some of you know her as a servant who's worked in the palace for months. What you don't know is that she's also my true mate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. True mate bonds were rare enough that most wolves went their entire lives without witnessing one. A week ago, she was attacked by rogues hired to strike at me through anyone wearing palace colors. They beat her, left her bleeding, and expected me to accept that violence without consequence. His voice went cold. They were wrong. As was the pack leader who sent them and the rivals who thought yesterday they could demand I surrender her. More murmurs. News of yesterday's attack had spread, but hearing it confirmed from the Alpha King himself made it real. I want every wolf here to understand something. Renarian's eyes swept the crowd. Linnea is not just my mate. She is your queen. She will stand beside me in leadership. Her safety, her honor, her happiness, these are now foundational to this pack's well-being. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Any insult to her is an insult to me. And I will respond accordingly. The threat was unmistakable. Absolute. He was drawing a line in blood and daring anyone to cross it. But more than that, his voice softened slightly. I want you to see what I see. Not an Omega servant, not a nobody, but a wolf who's survived loss and hardship and chose kindness over bitterness. Who worked tirelessly without complaint. Who has already shown the kind of strength this pack needs in difficult times. He turned to me then, his expression gentle. Linnea has agreed to accept the mate bond. To stand beside me. To learn what it means to be queen. I'm asking you to support her as she grows into that role. To give her the respect and patience she deserves. Then he released my hand and stepped back slightly, giving me space, giving me the opportunity to speak if I chose. Not demanding it, but offering it. I looked out at all those faces. Saw curiosity, skepticism, hope, judgment. Saw Mira near the front, giving me an encouraging nod. Saw Petra, arms crossed, a small smile on her weathered face. Saw Kale and Thorn and other warriors I recognized from the palace. My voice would be so small compared to Renarian's. But maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't need to command attention the way an Alpha King did. Maybe I just needed to be honest. I know I'm not what you expected, I began, and my voice was quieter, but it carried in the sudden silence. I'm not from a noble family. I don't have political connections or training in leadership. A week ago, most of you didn't know my name. I saw some nods. Agreement that yes, I was nobody special. But I know what it's like to work until your hands bleed and still not have enough coin for the month. I know what it's like to lose someone you love and inherit their debts. I know what it's like to be invisible, to move through spaces where people look through you instead of at you. More attention now. Understanding from the servants, the laborers, the wolves who weren't born to power. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I'll make mistakes as I learn. But I can promise I'll remember where I came from. I'll remember what it's like to be overlooked. I glanced at Renarian, drew strength from his presence. And I'll work every day to be worthy of the position the moon goddess chose for me. Silence held for a heartbeat. Then two. Then someone in the back, a servant I recognized from the kitchens, began to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. Others joined. Not universal, not overwhelming, but enough. Acceptance, tentative but real. Renarian's hand found mine again, and through the bond, I felt his fierce pride and satisfaction. There will be a formal mating ceremony 3 days from now, he announced. All pack members are invited to witness and celebrate. Until then, Linnea will be moving her belongings into my chambers. She is to be treated with all the respect due to your future queen. The crowd began to disperse, conversations breaking out in hushed tones. Some looked pleased, others uncertain. A few openly skeptical. But no one challenged. No one dared question the Alpha King's choice. As we turned to go back inside, I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, one of the warriors who'd never learned my name during all the months I'd cleaned the palace. He met my eyes briefly, and this time he bowed. Recognition. Respect. No longer invisible. That evening, as the sun set over the Mufong territory, I found myself on the same balcony, but this time alone with Renarian. How do you feel? He asked, his arm around my waist, keeping me close. Overwhelmed. Terrified. Grateful. I leaned into his warmth. Like my entire life changed in the span of a week. It did. He pressed a kiss to my temple. But you handled it perfectly. The speech, Linnea, you reached people I never could. You spoke to their experiences in ways that mattered. I just told the truth. Exactly. That's what makes you perfect for this. He turned me to face him, his hands framing my face. You don't hide behind politics or pretty words. You're honest. Real. That's what this pack needs. I looked up at him, this powerful alpha king who'd chosen me, broken, invisible me, and decided I was worth fighting for. Worth protecting. Worth loving. I'm still scared, I admitted. Of failing. Of disappointing you. Of not being enough. You could never disappoint me. His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. And you're already more than enough. You always were. I just had to almost lose you to realize it. The mate bond hummed between us, golden and warm and certain. This connection that would last the rest of our lives. That would give me strength when I felt weak and remind me I was never alone. What are you thinking? Renarian asked softly. I smiled, genuine and full. I'm thinking about how a week ago I was nobody. Invisible. Walking home in the rain after washing 37 cloaks. And now? Now I'm the Alpha King's mate. Future Queen of Mufang. Standing on a balcony I used to clean, being held by someone who sees me, really sees me, for the first time in my life. I'll always see you, he promised. For the rest of our lives, Linnea, you'll never be invisible again. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, and I felt the truth of his words in every fiber of my being. The rogues who'd attacked me had meant to break me, to send a message through violence. Instead, they'd accidentally given me everything I'd never dared dream of. A mate who would burn the world down to keep me safe. A position that would let me help others who'd been invisible like me. A future that was terrifying and uncertain, but undeniably mine. When we finally pulled apart, the moon was rising over the forest, full and bright, the moon goddess watching over her children. I sent a silent prayer of thanks to her for this gift, for this impossible love, for seeing something in me worth blessing. Ready to face tomorrow? Renarian asked, his forehead against mine. I thought about the formal ceremony in 3 days. About learning to be queen. About all the challenges that would come with standing beside the most powerful alpha in the territory. Then I thought about his arms around me, his faith in me, the strength I discovered I possessed when I needed it most. Ready, I said. As long as you're with me. Always. He sealed the promise with another kiss. From now until the moon goddess calls us home, you're mine and I'm yours. Nothing will change that. Through the open windows behind us, I could hear the palace settling in for the night. Guards changing shifts. Servants completing final tasks. The normal rhythm of life in a place that was now my home, not just my workplace. I was no longer invisible. No longer nobody. I was Linnea, mate to the Alpha King, chosen by the moon goddess herself. And while the path ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly difficult, I would walk it with my head high and my hand in Renarian's. The girl who'd been beaten in the rain had died that night. But the woman who'd emerged was stronger, braver, and ready to claim the life she deserved. And she was finally, completely, perfectly seen. The end. What moment in Linnea's journey resonated most with you? The moment she chose to accept the bond, or when she finally believed she was worthy of being seen? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.